welcome everyone. Welcome to Unlocking the Future of 5G in Manufacturing online event hosted by Electronic Media Services and Nokia. I'm Vanessa Dalbusco, Marketing and PR Consultant. Please let us know where you're dialing in from today by typing in the chat box and let us know what you do too. So, hello, who do we have? Hello? Okay, welcome. More people joining as we speak. Fantastic. We have a fabulous agenda plan for this afternoon with a tremendous panel, very exciting discussion to come. So I'll just wait to do the housekeeping while we let some more people join. Welcome everyone to Unlocking the Future of 5G in Manufacturing online event. I'm Vanessa Dalbusco and we can see more people joining now. We'll just wait for one more minute while more people join. We can see that those attendee numbers going up. Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining. So Nicole from IUK and KTN, welcome. You sit on the UK 5G manufacturing group. It's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining. You probably know some of the panelists. Great to have you with us. Thanks very much. Hello, Upkar Daliwal. I hope I said that right. 44 robotics using radar sensors. That sounds exciting. Welcome, Upkar. Thank you very much for joining. More people joining as we speak. We'll give you a few more minutes before we start the housekeeping. Hello, Abdelatif. I hope I said that right. You're from Digital Catapult. Welcome, and you're a 5G technologist. We have quite a few of those on the panel today. Great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining. Welcome. So we have quite an international attendee group here. Thank you very much for typing in the chat. Fantastic. So we'll just wait for one more minute. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Unlocking the Future of 5G in Manufacturing. I'm Vanessa Dalbusco, Marketing and PR Consultant. Thank you very much, Paul, Crowther, Abdelatif, Upkar, Nicole, for typing in the chat. Paul, you're currently seeking operations management roles. Okay, Northwest UK, that's fantastic to know. Thank you very much. Let us know what you do too. So we have a fabulous agenda plan for this afternoon, and I'll just go over some housekeeping notes and then we'll get launched straight into the panel. So there are two ways you can engage today. Many of you have already discovered the chat function. We recommend you change the audience to say all panelists and attendees so you can interact with each other too. So if you have a question for the panel, please put it in the Q&A box. We recommend you use the Q&A function because we'll not be checking the chat for questions. So questions in the Q&A, and you should be able to like the questions that are your favorites. That makes sure we answer the questions that you want answered. Questions into Q&A, go in there and like your favorites, interact in the chat. One more thing, please go to the top right of your screen to the view button and select gallery mode. This will ensure the best viewing setting for the event today. This session is being recorded. Hello, Catherine Gull, welcome. And now I'd like to introduce the chair of the panel today, Andrew Lambert. Andrew is the founder and CEO of Electronic Media Services, who is hosting this event along with Nokia today, and the founder of COO of Fiber. So a chartered engineer, Andrew has worked in Europe and Asia and founded Electronic Media Services in 1995, which is a technology consultancy and telecoms company which manufactures routers and cloud management software. So Andrew is also a founder of Fiber. It's a telecoms company that installs full fiber broadband to new housing developments, and he is partial to a game of squash. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. So good afternoon and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining on a rather hot and stuffy day. We have we've organised this as a panel discussion to avoid having death by PowerPoint. So the agenda is really we'll have a panel discussion for the first 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. Because we have quite a diverse audience, so there'll be some people who know a lot about 5G and there'll be some people who will be relatively new. I thought I'd just take a few minutes just to cover really what 5G is and some of the background to the opportunities for private 5G in manufacturing. So I always describe 5G as consisting of three pillars. This consists of enhanced mobile broadband. Most people recognize this as very fast download speeds up to 1 gigabit per second. And the industry talks about this being used for immersive experiences, so delivering VR and AR to pick up people's headsets. The second pillar that is fundamental to 5G is the ultra reliable low latency communications. This is being able to guarantee delivery of packets in less than 1 second, or packets with a high degree of reliability. So packets will always be delivered. And this is obviously essential for process control. We had a client who operated some wind farms in Northern Europe, and if the wind farms didn't get their regular heartbeat messages, the wind farms would just shut down. And these were very remote. These were very remote wind farm installations, so it would possibly take somebody a day to travel to them to reset them. The third pillar for 5G is massive machine type communications. A current cellular system, 4G, that we're all familiar with, there's a limitation on the number of devices that can connect to each cell tower. And this is around 50,000 devices or so. If you thought about perhaps fitting IoT devices to shipping containers, it would be very easy in a port like Felixstowe or London Gateway to see the number of devices being something in its, nearer to 1 million devices per square kilometre. And this is exactly what 5G is designed to solve with its massive machine type communications. The other benefits of 5G are the ability to do network slicing. So this is about taking a pipe of the 5G network and giving it an enhanced quality of service or some improved security. And most of the vendors, most of the network operators today, so EE and Vodafone, all they've really deployed at the moment is the enhanced mobile broadband, with the higher download speeds. They're still mostly operating a 4G core. The ultra reliable stuff and the massive machine type communications will probably start to emerge in 2023, 2024, once the standards have all been finalized. The UK is keen to see 5G the UK as a leader in 5G and the deployment and the use of it. So DCMS, as part of Cultural Media and Sports, have run a set of testbed and trials. And that's been funded to the tune of several tens of millions of pounds. These trials have been in specific verticals, so rural, health, transport, and of course manufacturing. And Worcester 5G and West Midlands 5G have a definite theme in the smart manufacturing in 5G. And I'm hoping Steve will talk, one of our panelists will talk about the business benefits that came out of the Worcester Bosch trial. In the 5G arena, you can have both a public 5G network, so this would be operated by a mobile network operator, so again EE, 3 or Vodafone. Or you can have a private 5G. So the private 5G might be delivered by using a slice on a public network, or it may be a completely separate private network. We're fortunate in the UK that Ofcom have brought to market a scheme called Spectrum Access for Innovation. And with this provides access to some shared spectrum and also on using unused spectrum that the MNOs currently have licensed. They also have local access licenses, which again have some dedicated spectrum available for use in for private 5G. DCMS are currently funding another project in the area of Open RAN. This is the RAN is the radio component. Some of you may know this is where the Huawei equipment was predominantly deployed in the UK, and DCMS are funding a competition in that area to bring new players into the 5G supply chain. And the US, of course, is also very active in this area. So I'd like to now sort of turn and introduce our panel. So Simon Parry is the CTO of Nokia, and he's worked in the telecoms industry for over 20 years. He's got 20-something odd patents to his name, and from his time as a researcher and developer at Nortel and Sina. He's got a passion for all things, all the bits of networking that you can't see and don't talk about. So all the stuff behind the scenes. And he's recently joined Nokia as their CTO for their enterprise group in Europe, UK and Ireland. Ricardo Weber, I'd like to introduce Ricardo. He's a mechanical engineer with a deep background in manufacturing at GKN and the Prysmian Group, having worked in industries like automotive, off-highway, energy, construction, telecoms, and he's the lead for the West Midlands 5G manufacturing vertical, where he is tasked with delivering testbed and trials projects and reaching out to manufacturers, especially SMEs, to help them understand the opportunities for 5G. We're also very fortunate to have Steve Ashton on the panel, who works for Worcestershire County Council. Steve was a member of the team that ran the Worcestershire Bosch testbed and trial, and is now part of the next G-Works project out in Worcestershire. And he'll cover his experience of the 5G manufacturing and the outcome of the testbed and trial that was run in Worcester. Stephen Muldowney, I think most people in the industry knows, he's an independent consultant, 23 years technology experience helping clients create business enhancing creative solutions. As I said, he's well known in the cellular industry. He was head of wireless business development for Huawei, and they were involved in the Worcestershire Bosch and Cambridge wireless 5G deployments. And I met Stephen in many events, but also we're jointly members of the Tech UK 5G ecosystem working group. And the final member of the panel is John Crawford, an independent advisor and NED, advising on emerging technology and go-to-market with a 5G focus. He led the Verizon's international 5G deployment, so that covered everything outside the Americas, and he launched the Verizon 5G lab in London, bringing together vendors and industry partners. So I think you'll agree we have a really experienced panel here, and I have a few questions that I will start asking, and then around 3:35 we'll open it up to the questions that you start putting in the Q&A box. So if you have any questions, do put them in the Q&A box. Before we start the questions, we have the first poll. Vanessa, please. No, we're obviously not going to do the poll. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So really the question I'd really be quite interested to know is, do you have any type of networking capability installed outside of your current office environment in your business place? So if you run a warehouse, do you have any networking in the warehouse? If you run a manufacturing plant, do you have any network capability out on the shop floor, or is the networking only in the office space? So how are we doing, Vanessa? Shall we close the poll? Oh, that's very interesting. So about half and half. So because one of the questions that obviously comes up is about the benefits of digitizing stuff. So that's really interesting that half the audience already really understand the benefits of digitizing their business. So with that, I'd like to sort of move on to the first question, which I'm going to fire at you here, John. So what do you think the benefits of a private 5G versus a public 5G might be?
I think it's one of these things that once you start realizing the benefits, it's hugely advantageous. The true private network, it's something that you then own and you control. I mean, where I live, I'm still waiting for 4G, so I'm not really that keen on waiting for 5G. And with a private network, you can choose when you want to deploy. You can set the performance to the performance of your needs, not necessarily the operator's needs, but yours as the business. If you think about in-building coverage, and again, think back to the 3G and 4G rollouts and the challenges that we all had there, then again, you can mitigate those by taking control of that design and designing it for your business and your business needs. I think the crown jewels and all lot is data and the ownership of that data. I've talked to many a CISO who has been very concerned about, one, the growth of the data and the richness of it, and absolutely the volume of it that is suddenly enabled with a huge 5G network, that you can get huge amounts of massive data coming through. So the integrity of that, the security of it, again, becomes something that you can control as a business and an enterprise. And the other thing is, it's really easy to do. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors about it's something weird and wonderful and a bit of Harry Potter, but it's actually very straightforward. If you get a decent partner, help you with the design, get the design right, the deployment of the equipment, and I'm sure Simon's going to talk to us about that in a lot of detail. But there are platforms out there now that you can deploy a private 5G network for your business.
That's really great, John. You mentioned there about data and security. So obviously the question is how does 5G help with the sort of cyber security channels that exist? And perhaps, Simon, this is something that you might be able to address.
Okay, cool. So as with any cellular network, 4G, 5G, whichever, they're all secured with a SIM card. So if you don't have a physical SIM card, you don't get on the network. And that's pretty well proven technology. Certainly there's a lot of money at stake that's relying in the public networks of things. But it's, part of private networking is having, as John was talking about, you get control of the data, but you also get control of the SIM cards. And you can decide which ones come onto your network and which ones don't. There's also an aspect of that the air interface, the radio interface, is encrypted. It's fairly light encryption, certainly not something that you perhaps bet state secrets on, but it certainly prevents any casual eavesdroppers accessing your data, seeing what it is, that it's it is all encrypted. The other aspect of cybersecurity with this world is you sometimes hear of devices called stingrays or interception boxes. It's actually a brand name, but it's this idea that you can hack, turn up next to an existing cell and spoof it, pretend to it. And that technique works because you downgrade security. So you actually start off on a 4G or 5G network and you force it all the way down to working as a 2G network, and which strips off all the authentication because we fixed it all in 4 and 5G. Joy of these private networks is there is no 2G network, there is no 3G network. You can't do a downgrade attack. There's nothing to downgrade it to. So there's some, interesting cybersecurity aspects that having your own network gives you a lot more control and a lot more security than using someone else's.
That's really interesting. We're working on an R&D project ourselves, and our security partners in that project have also talked very much about this issue of forcing a downgrade in the network, and we're building AI into the network. So, and then that brings a whole new attack surface. Mm-hmm. If they can downgrade your network and then put your AI engine into a different out of its normal operating environment, it might produce some interesting results. I see, Steve, you put your hand up, so I know you have some comments in this area.
Yeah, sure. And I think that it's really important those inherent features are within the design of 5G and within the design of private networks. I think, you know, one of the concerns that we've encountered with industrial partners is, won't the increased surface area of devices, etc., create a bigger surface area for attack? But equally, and as I say, those inherent points in the design of the SIM cards, etc., mean that it is actually, you know, safer effectively than before. And I guess, you know, some of the other concerns we heard was Yamazaki Mazak, who sells CNC machines into other manufacturers. They obviously benefit from getting data off their machines when they're on a customer site. They could get more data off their customer machines off sites when they had an old dial-up connection, because increasingly now over other networks, the customers are concerned about getting into the IT networks, into the firewall, etc. And what we recognise there, that by offering a channel, a 5G channel away from that, actually Mazak could get far more data from them, and being able to do that and removing the IT department from the sale speeds up their sales pitch, and makes an easy sale, keeps an easy sale easy, as opposed to getting it too complicated. And I think for us, you know, one of the thoughts that we were kind of twinging with was this kind of 5G secure kite mark around certain products or applications or services that are in there. And again, on the Worcestershire 5G project, our partner Kinetic developed a portfolio of kind of 5G security products and services, effectively providing security and assurance of both the 5G network, but also applications and other IoT networks as well. And they've got all those listed on their website, but I know they definitely benefited from learning there, and Kinetic have got that history and experience of cybersecurity as well. So really good to work with them in our experience.
I like the idea of the security kite mark. I think that will be quite interesting. So I mean, I guess there's probably quite a few people in the audience who are sitting here saying, well, all this is fine and dandy and sounds really exciting, but actually, how can I test if 5G is right for me, and what does the business case look like? Oh, Vanessa's pops the poll up, so maybe we could do the poll, and then we'll do the question. So as a member of the audience, what do you think the key barrier is holding you back from deploying a private LTE or 5G network at the moment in your manufacturing and logistics business? Just give it a few more seconds. So let's close the poll. Hopefully everybody has voted by now. So I think, unsurprisingly, the number one is the lack of know-how, and number two is that the end devices and assets supporting 5G. I think we will come back to that. We certainly will have a question on that. Either if it doesn't appear in the Q&A section, then we certainly have a question on that for later. So given that number three is there, so can I ask you then, Steve, to say how can you find out if 5G is right for me, and how can I do that though? How can I do those baby steps?
Sure, and I think, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I, having just put on the table a testbed as a service offer through XG Works, but I do think that testbeds do have a really key part to play there. It allows manufacturers that opportunity to have a trial and a test of the technology, test it in anger, without necessarily that big capital outlay. I think it's a safe environment in which to trial and play and learn, opportunities to be among like-minded parties and the like. I think the other thing from many test beds is there's quite a few test beds out there now. There are others that you could choose to work with out there, but I think that many of them are independent, so they're not trying to sell you or tie you down to a particular solution in the long term, which is a really nice place to be. And as an example, what we're doing at the Manufacturing Technology Centre in Coventry with one of the facilities we're building there, that's enabling businesses to come in and just literally do that on the shop floor, who are the partners, using the networking play. There's Nokia NDAC piece, and Ricardo may well have some comments on that as well. But I think it just helps you. The key point for it as well, being able to do that testing and that trialing, it allows you to, for your business case and to develop that business case and push it forward. It gives you that real data. It's not a series of hypotheses. It's not a punt out there to see whether this is going to work for you. You can actually come and play with this, test it and trial it without putting that outlier in the first place.
And
Yeah, Steve,
I was going to say, Steve, Ricardo, Steve has obviously suggested you may have some comments on this.
Absolutely. I would almost do one step back, actually. And Steve, you mentioned about the use cases and the applications. I think the first step before you even consider 5G or whatever digitalization technology, you need to be absolutely clear about your use case and the application you want to solve. What are the requirements for that? What is the output you want to achieve? So what speeds do I need? Do I need wireless? Can I plug it in? Do I need to be mobile about that? What's the amount of data I'm actually handling? An important question, I think, is also thinking longer term. So 5G today, but does that future-proof my business in the long term? That's the question to ask. And also keeping the eyes out, what is your supply chain and what are your customers doing? Are you an island in the development, or is it a customer requirement to jump onto 5G? So there's quite a lot to consider before you then can go and look at 5G test beds, where I would suggest to also have a look at our website. We have there developed how-to guides, like starting points for manufacturers to really, what's the first step? Who do I go to? Who do I ask? What can I learn about that? We also do explore sessions. Steve, you mentioned the MTC. We're also doing accelerators, so Spring, if you've heard of that, in the Midlands, that is expanding countrywide now. So there are quite a lot of different places where you can really reach out and understand a little bit more about 5G.
Andrew, do you mind if I just again agree with Ricardo there? And I think what we see with the businesses and businesses that are coming to us and talking to us is it really shouldn't be technology for technology's sake, but there are some early adopters and excited enthusiasts out there who just want to have a go. 5G, how can this make a difference? They're few and far between. I wouldn't suggest that's the best way to go at it. As Ricardo said, people are coming to us for all different reasons. Sometimes they've identified a problem in production or a process that they want to improve. Other times they've just got an overall vision of where they think 5G can make a difference. And we've seen anything there from, we've largely focused on improving productivity, but you also start to see with that comes quality control, with that comes customer satisfaction, improving quality, training opportunities, environment, and perhaps not too surprised to hear on a recent session that several people were looking at this from a green and carbon neutral perspective as well. How can technology help them with those, either whether it's reduced travel or more efficient processes in there as well. So that was interesting to me, and I guess others have also got unknown unknowns. They don't really know what the problem is, and other times they've got false truths. They make an assumption that you always have a 20% wastage on this particular product or service or this machine, and actually you have the opportunity to challenge them. And all I would say in this particular part of it, from everybody that we've worked with, the original business case or use case has always morphed, has always evolved. People have found other reasons of why 5G has been helpful to them. And actually, as I say, that use case has become 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6 use cases. So it's quite an exciting space for people to get into.
Thank you for that. See, I quite liked your unknown bit. My business does a lot of work in the construction sector. We provide technology in the construction sector, and one of our clients was involved in remediating an old car plant, and when they started remediating the site, they discovered about several tens of thousands of litres of petrol floating on top of the water table, and the assumption there in the business has always been that it was the staff stealing the petrol. But actually they just had a very leaky distribution system around the site, and they just didn't know that because they weren't collecting the data. Obviously the use cases and the business cases are important, and that's one of the reasons why DCMS has invested the money that they have in supporting the test beds and trials. And I wonder, Stephen, if you could talk a little bit about what the lessons learned from the program has been, and some of the successes have been, and maybe what has failed, because there's always things that didn't quite live up.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I think in general, I think it's been successful. It'd be wrong to say it hasn't been. Without that investment and push to the market, maybe those wouldn't been as many 5G opportunities, in different verticals. And it's difficult balancing out for the government because they've got to balance up, not just looking at some of the commercial elements of it. So how do we make manufacturing more productive, efficient, for UK GDP, but they've also got to look at some of the softer and more sort of social elements of it. So, my favourite, of course, test bed is the Liverpool one, where it looked at sort of helping social care in the community. So, where how you use technology to basically deal with, certain challenges within the health sector around, resource. People not taking the right medication, taking too much medication, outpatients having to come back into hospital. So how technology can help with some of the sort of social elements of it. But again, I think because today's focus is really around sort of the manufacturing and logistics, then it's sort of probably more important to focus on some of those projects. And I think as Steve outlined, I was involved in the Worcester project through one of the other partners. And I think the key bit there was also around sort of looking at efficiencies. These industries like manufacturing and even logistics to a certain extent are very super efficient industries. So each year they're looking for single-digit improvements, and so that's very difficult to do. And and I think on their case they were normally they'd be Worcester Bosch looking at sort of multiple different programs to gain those efficiencies. It could be hundreds, even thousands of different programs or changes they would do to do that, where they saw that they basically, by making one single change around 5G, they could forecast a greater level of efficiencies, improvements that they could get, and that's a massive bonus for them of just taking that on board. So I think there's some really good, good examples out there. There's one that's the recent one that's been announced, which is at the Nissan factory, where it's looking at automation between that sort of the public and the private network, and how does it look at automating the delivery of goods in the supply chain between. And so that's looking at automated delivery between the sites, which which then that technology can be taken further in terms of sort of connected trucks, in terms of being able to have a lorry that basically can, where you've got automated delivery as such. So I think there's some really good positive and some really good lessons from that. And I think generally the key bit around the sort of lessons are of course all boring sort of process and elements that so the system that's been put in place that's quite sort of difficult. But I think there are some real sort of key ones, which is about sort of making sure that the test beds are quite significantly large, so you get a good data set, so you can actually you can have with confidence that the output from those, the lessons learned, are things that can be a true reflection of what of the reality, and also over long periods. You can collect data over a longer period, so you've got that as well. So I think that's quite important. And I think from a manufacturing perspective, it's around the coming together, the OT and the IT world. That there's a lot of feedback from reports of people who have looked into this and done detailed reports that have stated on this, this point around the challenges around working on a live site, for these test beds. So, the challenges of putting equipment in. But it's mainly around, I think, sort of lesson learned for the sort of future that's relevant to today's call. Is really around that. How do I get those two worlds to work together? There was issues around the different language, communication, terminology used, and also the different way they were working, etc. And I think that's quite a key challenge. And be interesting to see if anybody else in the panelist or anybody on the call has a similar experience around these two domains coming together and the challenges around those within a manufacturing or logistics work site.
I chaired a panel discussion last year last year during 5G week, and that was one of the topics that came up was how do you get the IT people in a manufacturing environment to talk to the radio people who probably speak a completely different language.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the questions that normally comes up in this area is what are the benefits of 5G over Wi-Fi? Why would I choose that? And I wonder if you have a view on that, Simon.
Okay. So I think we've kind of slightly alluded to it, but Wi-Fi lives in a world where you don't pay for spectrum. It's a free resource, but there are some very strict rules about how you share it with everybody else. There are strict power limits. There are protocol limits. There's this idea that you listen and you make sure there's a gap before you try and speak, much like we're doing on, on a busy Zoom call. And you contrast that with the world of licensed spectrum. And you contrast that with the world where you have a license from the regulator, the UK Ofcom, and therefore it's yours and you can decide what to do with it. And there, the base station can sit there and organize it, much like you've been doing, Andrew, that you speak, then you speak, then you speak. And it's this much more efficient mechanism. And it, combined with the higher powers, means that it's a very different experience. So with licensed spectrum, you typically can go twice as far with the same power, but often you can have much greater power. You can go through more walls, but you get greater reliability. You get greater throughput. So as the system gets loaded, because someone's organizing it, you actually see that the same performance all the way up to full loading. So if you want a better manufacturing plant on a technology, you can have one that slows down the more you load it, or one that stays exactly the same no matter what you load it with. And that's really the difference. Is, so don't get me wrong, I'm not, Wi-Fi is a brilliant technology. It solves all sorts of problems. About half of us are using it to talk to each other right now. Brilliant in the home, brilliant in the office, but it really starts to show the limitations of a shared spectrum when you start to try and use it in anger, when there's people's lives at stake, when there's safety at stake, when there's money at stake, these ideas of things. So that's really, the difference in the approach and principle of the two technologies.
Thank you for that, Simon. And I think that leads on to one of the questions we've actually had in the Q&A box, which is access. So this is from Paul, and this is access to spectrum. Does the panel have a view on the options of spectrum leasing from the MNOs or making use of shared access licensed spectrum identified by Ofcom? Well, Stephen's put his hand up.
Yeah, no, I think there's room for both. I think the one, of course, the advantages sort of the getting the spectrum from the operators can be there's more bandwidth available from them for applications, and I know that there's been some good examples where there's been partnerships, for example, where 5G has been used to offer Wi-Fi or fixed wireless access service to holiday homes, where they're partnered with the mobile operator to do it. So I think, again, Ricardo said, it's about the use case. So look at your use case, now and in the future, and then map that to does the spectrum that I can get, does that meet my requirement today and tomorrow? And if of course, there's all the higher bands of 3.8 to 4.2 that you can use as well. If you need that higher throughput, but again, there are still limits in terms of the power output of those. So I think it's you need to look at the use case first and then work from there.
And Steve?
I was going to say, I agree with Stephen, but in the short term, in the absolute short term, the shared spectrum space is the N77 effectively, there is a shortage of devices. They're coming back to the results of the first poll. So again, I think if you're looking to do something if you're doing something now at the minute, then there is definitely an advantage to the MNO based spectrum effectively as your solution.
So that obviously sort of leads into that availability of the devices. I wondered if, John, with your more international hat on, whether you had a view on the development of devices that would make use of this of the Ofcom license.
Yeah, and the lab and Verizon have got now 6 labs, and they're just one company, which is basically trying to propagate, let's say, the solutions. not just solutions, but devices and all manner of things to support it. And I'd reinforce what was said just by the panelists a bit earlier, which is, in effect, it's not one size fits all. There's going to be different things for different uses, and the goal is trying to find the best solution for the need. So you're going to see devices which will require Wi-Fi, which will require 5G in different spectrums and different bands. And I think you're going to see a lot more of those coming through. We're already starting to see handsets appear, classic consumer devices, but we're also seeing tablets. We're seeing PCs and laptops. I think Dell made an announcement at the beginning of this year in terms of what they're doing. So there's a lot of devices coming through. In terms of the timeline to those appearing, it's a bit chicken and egg, because clearly the device manufacturer wants the volume, and the volume needs the people using it. So I think we'll see more of these coming through as the things happen. The one comment I would make in terms of again, it's back to this whole private versus public. The device manufacturers have to go after the volume, and the MNO can actually put a much bigger check on the table than the smaller volumes that you'll see in the enterprise. So I think there is going to be a tipping point, and where that is, not quite sure. But whilst the MNO is deriving the architecture and pushing the architectures from their spectrum point of view, they'll make sure the devices are being built to support their spectrum. But I'm under no illusions, and certainly with the amount of device manufacturers, and someone else mentioned IT earlier, the number of IT partners getting into this as well. Just go on to Microsoft's website, Google's, Accenture's, anyone with an IT SKU, you'll find pages and pages about what they're trying to do with 5G. So I think we're going to see that whole growth and that evolution happening, and the glue coming together, which in turn will derive the devices, which in turn deriving the solutions.
Thank you for that, John. So I mean, Simon, did you, as a manufacturer, did you have a view on the availability of devices?
We've tried to say John's comments about tipping point is we've sort of gently snuck a finger on the scales, but we know this is a problem. So whilst there's the slight complexity that Nokia sold the brand for devices and handsets to Microsoft, remember back in the day, and it's now owned by a Finnish company called HMD. So all the Nokia phones have nothing to do with Nokia, but we know it's a problem. So we've been out and essentially paid for the minimum order quantity. John was talking about, a lot of manufacturers need a minimum 1,000, maybe 10,000 for some of the devices before they'll start making them. So we've been out and placed those to try and seed the ecosystem. I've got whole piles of them lying around, whether it's a dongle, so that's a USB dongle. 5G works in the bands all the way up to 4.2 that we've just talked about. We've got routers, I know, but it's, we're trying to solve that chicken and egg problem by making sure that some are available, and whether it's the MTC one or the Nissan one that we've just talked about, or the Southampton Troll, these are all using the shared access band in N77, and these are all Plymouth Sound one. And so that's been a need to have the devices to get the use case. But as Ricardo was saying, it's very, very important that you actually need to start with the use case, which therefore decides what your device is, and go forward from there, rather than, oh, we've got a network, what should we connect to it?
So that's very interesting, and I mean, I think that from the suppliers we talk to, we can definitely see more devices beginning to appear, especially with that more industrialized build quality rather than a pure consumer device. There is a question in the Q&A which is from Stephanie. So this is, with a evolving telco tech ecosystem, how should a manufacturer look at selecting a vendor for 5G private network rollout? So probably going to give Simon the first pass on that, and maybe John or Stephen, maybe.
I'm going to not sit here and make an active, advertisement, but I'm going to take Ricardo's point, which is, what's the use case? What do you want to do? What's the outcome? Is what you're trying to do where a separate network is brilliant, or do you want one that starts to connect to the world? Do you want one from someone who speaks with an OT language. To Stephen's point, do they know the language? They know the words? Are they talking OT language? Or do you want someone who sits there? So there are many options, and frankly, all are viable paths, but it's driven by what do you want out of the relationship. But going back to spectrum, but we've now got the likes of Vodafone around Plymouth Sound using shared spectrum to deliver a network, a 5G network in the area of Plymouth Sound. So don't worry about the bands, don't worry about things. Start with the use case and talk to the partner, to the system integrator, DIY to the telco system integrator. Pick the person that is giving you what you need in terms of achieving your use case, depending on what your skill level is, your interests, and so on and so forth.
That's what I was about to say, Simon. It's like,
there you go.
Very much depends also very much on how much capabilities you have in-house, how big your business is. Is your IT department ready to do that? Or do you have an IT department? I mean, there are lots of manufacturers who are actually quite small in this country, so they won't even have an IT department. They have the IT guy. So then you want to partner with somebody who can actually help you on that. System integrators, you might even want to start with a consultant. Mm-hmm. So there is no one size fits all to answer that question, Stephanie. Sorry.
If I might comment, Andrew, I mean, one of the answers back on the poll was about the lack of know-how. And I do think that is prevalent. I was doing a consultation with a very large investment bank literally this past week. And it never ceases to amaze me just how little know-how there is out there at the moment. I also think that because we're in an evolving space, things are changing so quickly that what was current maybe even 3 months ago is now moved on and things are happening. But the interesting thing is that the technology, and if I give you an example, when we set up the lab, the technology is moving rapidly and moving quickly. I'll give Simon a wee bit of a plug, but at the time we made a decision on, clearly there were 2 European manufacturers of core equipment that we looked at, and the NDAC stood out, and the logic and rationale behind it was we could start small and we could go big, so we could scale. And it goes back to the whole storyboard around the discussion here, which is, you've got to identify a use case, and then as Steve said earlier, things will change and evolve in that use case, let alone you'll find other things to add to it. And that's the experience that I certainly had when I was building at the lab. And also that we saw with customers, and enterprise customers in particular, the larger the enterprise customer, the more things that suddenly would pop up and they would want to add in. So you need a scalable platform. You need to be able to grow and actually evolve and move with it. And the other things are going to come. I mean, the other things are the device story is getting there and will get better over time. And as more and more people buy into the ability to use the technology, that will again support the demand generation for all those device manufacturers to build. So I think it's a good story.
Thank you for that, John. So we've got one other question in the Q&A session, which has got quite a high vote, and that is I think going to be for both you, Steve, and Ricardo, which is how can systems integrators engage with the Worcestershire testbed or the West Midlands project. So Ricardo, why don't you go first, and then we'll come back to Steve.
Well, you could, for example, go through our website, fill in a form, send that off and hope that somebody picks it up and gets back to you. Or you just connect to me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and we'll take it from there. I like to keep it simple. So direct access, if you want to, you have my name, just contact me. With MTC, again, we're working on our testbed anyways with MTC, so I can signpost you there directly to the contact person. And Steve, I mean, for you, how would it work for you? I think very similar.
Yeah, exactly the same. LinkedIn, email, website, traditional.
So thank you for that. So clearly, my experience of filling in forms on websites is the same as everybody else's. So I think we've had. Well, have we? No. I would. Just having a quick look at the other questions. We might have time for one more. one of the questions that did come up was 5G looks very specialized, and that was the middle one. So Simon, do you want to just and perhaps just talk about how one, some of the routes to getting a network up and working quickly?
Okay, so it's a slight product plug code, but one of the advantages that Nokia has had many years working with things, it's meant that when Ofcom found this piece of spectrum between 3.8 and 4.2 gigahertz, we actually had a radio that supported it. It turns out that the Japanese market uses that band. So we have radio, and we've been spending the past 3 or 4 years developing a core specifically for the enterprise. It fits on a 2U server. A few months ago, I had it sitting on the sofa behind me. It's a bit loud, sitting that close to the fans, but it's about 20 minutes from powering it up to actually getting data through it. These are the sorts of technologies and stuff that are out there. People are making stuff designed for the point that Ricardo was making of, and in fact John as well, is if you don't have the IT skills, if you don't have the radio skills, if you can't speak these 6 and 7 letter acronyms that 5G people like to use, so you turn it on, it works. Go on, Stephen.
Yeah, no, I'd just like to add in that I think that you're right. A lot of the industries recognise the need for these equipment to be IT friendly. So they're very similar to the things the world of kick and play that a lot of the IT world is seeing. So a lot of the projects I've worked on, that's been sort of a critical sort of foot in the door, is to prove that this technology is very simple, more IT friendly, and so can be deployed relatively simple. The skill sets they have to learn are relatively, they don't have to go out and do long training courses or get authentic, certificates to be able to use equipment. So I think, yeah, I'd only agree that the industry has listened to this. There's still work to do, of course, but I think it's, we're not in a really, nothing's plug and play in the telecoms world, but we're getting towards that world where there's that greater level of simplification of the network, and also the skills that are needed to install and run the network.
So thank you for that, Stephen. So I think we've got eight minutes left. So I think we'll just go into the sort of closing remarks. We did have a question here from Upcar, which was about 5G real value coming from release 6 and beyond. And I think I'm going to speak for the panel as a whole, but I think that those sort of devices and systems should start appearing in 2023, 2024, and maybe a bit early. We might see some stuff earlier in 2022, but the standards are pretty much sort of settled now, and it will those things will be rolling out. I am going to fire a last question to all of the panel members. So I'll give them the question now, and they can think about it. And then while they're doing that, I'm hoping that you'll answer the poll. So the question that the panel will get is, what will be the key use case for manufacturing in logistics, and when do you think we'll see some deployment at scale? And while they're thinking about that, hopefully you would look at the poll question here and give us your views on that. So are you thinking about 5G in your company in the next 12 months? Is that very likely, might consider it, or very unlikely? So I think probably had enough time on the poll there. Vanessa, what's the? Well, that's interesting. So we've got half the audience saying that they're interested in considering 5G in the next 12 months. So we've obviously got a bit of work to do on the very unlikely group, but more than half of you. So 3/4 is might consider or very likely to consider. So before I do so I think we've had quite an interesting, had a very interesting discussion. Lots of talk about data and security, the benefits of 5G over Wi-Fi, being that it's in controlled environment, a bit better spectrum management. One of my pet hates with Wi-Fi is that my iPhone hangs on to the access point in my study when I walk upstairs. Even when it's about a third of a bar and there's no service, it still won't attach automatically to the access point in my loft, which is about 12 bars. So that there are some benefits of using 5G. That clearly comes with some complexity, but the industry is working to make this more of a plug and play solution. So before we finally close, I'll just go back around the panel and we'll start with John, as he's on the top left of my screen. So back to that question, what's the key use for manufacturing or logistics, and when might we see some deployment at scale?
So I'm lucky, I get to go first then. I'd actually bolt in two things into that question. One is 5G, but the other piece is MEC, multi-access edge compute. I think the two things go hand in glove, and they will help to deliver. But to be brutal about it, they're both enabling technologies. So they enable things to happen. And if I look at the application solutions and deployments that I've seen, again, most recently over probably the last 12, 18 months of companies talking about it, IoT, or the ability to connect thousands of devices, millions of devices, that is becoming, it's making IoT real. And then the second piece is video. I mean, virtually everyone was talking about video, and I shouldn't forget security. So sorry to the rest of the panel, but I think those three come in every single time we talk to a customer.
Thank you. So Ricardo, you're the next one on my screen. So again, short and sharp, we've only got a few minutes left. Yeah, well, again, with us being quite focused on the SMEs, the smaller manufacturers specifically, considering where they are on their journey, I think for me, the most relevant ones are the asset and process tracking to really increase the productivity and the profitability basically at the end. To scale, I think we'll see some more deployments in 2022 and picking up possibly in H2 of 2023, I would think. And Steve, you're the next one on my screen as I work round.
I'm going to be the first one to wimp out here. Agree with John. You've got video and IoT at opposite ends of the spectrum. I think any private network, to be viable, must support multiple use cases. I don't think you'll have a problem finding those multiple use cases once you find the one that really needs 5G for you. And I bring this around to just a final point here, which I think we should actually be thinking about a place case. So it's a series of multiple use cases within one geography, and whether that one geography be a factory, an industrial park, and bringing the same sort of demands together, or even thinking wider in my county council hat on a community or a county or a shire or something like that. But the point, it scales, the place case scales, and it's a network that supports multiple use cases for me. And
Stephen.
Yeah, no, to keep it short then, I agree with Steve that, you're looking at one single use case is not going to be the way forward. But in terms of my two sort of, my favorite use case around the maintenance, so whether that's, predictive maintenance, so looking at, how basically you can find, machinery that to reduce the unplanned downtime. And then the second bit related to the maintenance is the remote access agent being able to use AR to be able to then have, speak to a more skilled engineer remotely to be able to fix machines. So I think around maintenance is a key use case for manufacturing.
And Simon, the last word for you in the closing seconds.
So we use 5G in our factory today to make stuff, to make all the radios, and we do that because we need a new radio every 6 weeks to keep up with demand, and we need to tear the factory apart and reconfigure it. And if you don't have any wires, you can change it all around a lot quicker. So because we can't predict the future, we're wireless.
Fantastic, thank you for that. So I like the multiple use case bit. That's certainly one of the things that came out when TfL put Wi-Fi in all the underground stations. It drove a lot of extra use cases in the operation side rather than just the public access to broadband. Thank you for joining. I hope it's been a good use of your time on a hot afternoon. If you want to follow up, please contact us. You have my email on the slide here, and you will have our contact details on LinkedIn. And I'd like to thank the presenters for their time this afternoon, and especially Nokia for sponsoring the event. And thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday afternoon. Thank you.